So super excited for this conversation. And just to introduce myself, I'm Melina Cordero. If you don't know me already, I am the founder and president of P20 Workplace. And I was an exec in the commercial real estate space for just over a decade. And I left all of that a couple of years ago to focus on what I ended up being really passionate about, which is making work better for
Mhm.
everybody. And so, in most of that work, I work with organizations on making better cultures and developing really great leadership programs. But today, I'm talking about people, and I like helping people as well. And I think that the job search is a really important part of making sure we
Mhm.
find the places and the spaces where we can be happiest at work. And so I'm joined today by Allison. I'm going to let you introduce yourself and
Sure.
tell us who you are and why you are so fabulous, because you are.
You're so sweet. My name is Allison Weiss. I am the founder of CRE Recruiting. I have been in commercial real estate on the people side of the business for the last 10 years. I worked at some big firms. I had some experiences, and from those experiences, realized that I would rather work with smaller, more entrepreneurial, people focused companies that value the people just as much as they value the property. So I've been doing that for the last 5 years. I work with a variety of clients all across the country, from vertically integrated investor owner developers to the CRE tech and prop tech worlds to the debt and equity capital markets and every nook and cranny of CRE in between. I do searches anywhere from the entry level early career stuff all the way up to executive roles and C-level roles within commercial real estate, and really just care about making the industry a better place for the next generation, for women, for people of color, and get to do this kind of helpful work every single day, one-on-one, and like to, whenever possible, collaborate with my friends who also care about making work better for people so we can hit a larger audience and scale our impact. So thank you for having me, Melina.
I love it. I love it. And I love talking to you about this topic because you have this really unique perspective that you bring to it, which is working on the company side. What the hiring folks
Mhm.
are looking for, thinking about, prioritizing. And so that's what I really wanted to bring that expertise to the folks who are in the job search now. And before I start pelting you with questions, I want to say a couple of things. First, I
Yeah.
want to say right now, we're seeing a lot of layoffs. We're
Mhm.
seeing a lot of layoffs in the industry we've both worked in, commercial real estate,
Mhm.
and in others. There have been a lot of headlines around tech. So I want
Mhm.
you to know, if you're listening, if you're in that position, that you are not alone. And
Yes.
in most cases, it really has nothing to do with your performance or your talent.
Yes.
So that is first and foremost.
Yeah.
The second thing is, if you haven't been laid off, there are a lot of people who are unhappy with their jobs. They're not
Mhm.
thrilled to be where they are. And we know that from lots of stats about employee engagement and
Mhm.
surveys and contentment, right? So if you're in that position, you are also not alone. And we both, I think, would want to acknowledge that the job search is not fun. Not
No.
fun. It's
Yeah.
super stressful. It's difficult. It's trying and draining on a lot of levels, personally,
Mhm.
professionally, all the things. And so this conversation and the tips that Allison's going to share are really about making the job search a little bit less horrible. So I'm going to start because when I came to you, Allison, and I said, I
Mhm.
want to talk about this and help people, the first thing you said was, oh, yeah, we should talk about how to do a strategic job search. So the question I have for you is, when you talk about a strategic job search, what is that? What's a strategic job search as opposed to a regular job search?
For sure. So, one of the things you might hear about a company recruiting is that they just post the job and they pray that the right people might find it. That's how it's a non strategic move on the company's part. On the candidate's part, it's spray and pray. You spray your resume as far and wide as you possibly can. You don't really have any specificity as to what you're looking for. You're in desperation mode. And I get it. I feel like this process will make you feel that way. It'll make you feel like I should accept anything and I should be grateful for what I get. And I think, unfortunately, to use a great line from a former boss of mine, desperation is a stinky cologne. When people see that you're willing to do anything, that you're not specific in your search, they don't think you're the right candidate for them, right? They're looking for someone who specifically wants to be with their company and specifically wants to be in this role for reasons that align with your experience and your skill set and so forth. So, this idea that we just spray and pray, that it's a numbers game, to some degree, it is a numbers game. And I know that's something that we'll talk about later. But I think this idea that everyone gets a copy of our resume devalues us and turns us into a commodity and not a person. And so I would encourage you as much as possible. And back to the spraying and praying, when you're applying to 100, 200, 300 different roles, it's very difficult when your phone rings for you to pick up the phone and have any idea who it is that you are talking to, or the role that you applied for, or what initially even drew you to that role. So one of the things that I've offered that we'll do is for people in the comments who are looking for a tracker to keep organization throughout their job search. We have a great job tracker that I put together for CRE recruiting. And it's not just here's a link to the job that you applied for, here's the version of the resume that you used. If you're working with multiple versions, hopefully you are using resources, maybe ChatGPT, to run your resume, to run the job description, and link those together with similar language. Of course, still telling the truth about your backgrounds, but just maximizing your potential success. It also has fields for any connections you might have to the company or hiring manager, the pros of that opportunity, the things that you're most interested in, also the things that maybe you need to resolve as concerns. For instance, you might have, as you've applied for the role, gone on Glassdoor and seen that there's a theme in the particular comments for the marketing folks, and you might be searching for a marketing role. So a concern might be, do they have the latest technology? What platforms are they using? What sorts of resources? And what's the process by which maybe a broker brings work to a marketing person? What's the workflow? So it allows you to, when the phone rings, to be able to quickly Command F and search for the company, find all the questions that maybe you wanted resolved, the things that you're interested in, and any important details to remember through the process. One of the things that I'm hearing from candidates these days is that they might be receiving a request for a writing sample or a sample brief, or even doing a financial modeling exercise. So if there are any details that you need to remember there, or any deliverables and things like that, I would just throw out a tiny red flag. If you're getting requests for huge amounts of work or free labor, that's a red flag and a sign to you that's probably not the environment for you. But let us know if you want the tracker. We'll send it out to you. You do need to get to a critical mass where you're getting your resume in front of enough people, but not so many people that you're losing track, or that you are known all over town for looking for anything in the job search process.
There's a lot of great stuff in there. So I want to dig into a couple
Sure.
things. So, first, one of the questions I get a lot is, oh, I need to update my resume. I need to
Mhm.
do my resume. And I've done this too in the past when I was looking for a job, and I'll spend 3 full days perfecting my resume. And then I'm like, okay, I'm ready to get a job. And then I don't. One of the things that I've heard and read is, yeah, you want to tweak the resume a little bit. There's not one perfect resume, and you want to
Yeah.
tweak it a little bit for each role. So, can you talk a little bit about that? Balancing, okay, it's a bit of a numbers game, but also you
Mhm.
need to customize it for every position. How do we balance that?
For sure. So I would say an easy way to customize is to even reorder the bullet points of your resume in the relevancy that you see them in the job description. So if, for instance, you're looking at a role and you're an analyst, and you know that they really value the discounted cash flow modeling. If that's the last point on your most recent position, you want to move that up to the first point, because you know that's something that they really prioritize above other skills. So it's not always a rewrite. Sometimes it's just a reordering of the information that's already there. I do think it's smart for you to, as you are making edits and changes to your resume, is to keep one kind of master template, and then to save different versions. The way that I like to save the versions is the year, month, and then day that you applied. So today would be 24/10/18 underscore the company name underscore your full name and then resume. So then that way, if you're ever asked for that resume again, there's no question which version that you've used. Then you have that version actually linked to in the tracker. You can quickly pull it up and answer any questions that are specifically related to that version. One of the things that I would also tell people is job descriptions. Think of them like a checklist. Think of them like a person ordering off a menu. I want this, and I want this, and I want this. they generally are telling you things that you can then go through and say, okay, this skill, do I have it? Does it exist on my resume? If not, it doesn't exist to that recruiter, that hiring manager, the person that is looking through your background. They might make some assumptions and hopefully still pick up the phone or send you a message. But think of it that way. And I think that version control piece is really important in being consistent. I think also, too, your LinkedIn profile doesn't need to exactly reference your resume, but it should be very similar. It should at least rhyme. It doesn't have to be a perfect match, but making sure that there's consistencies between your LinkedIn profile, your resume, so there's not a red flag thrown up there, and also being very specific about what version you're sending what employer based on the relevancy of their job description. And ChatGPT can also help you with that. You can upload your resume, you can upload the job description, and you can say, help me to rewrite these bullet points. I have actually a few articles that we can share after the fact. I have some resources for people on exactly what prompts to use so you get a good result. But certainly anything that you put in ChatGPT, anything you put in any other AI platform needs to be proofread. It needs to sound like you. Unfortunately, sometimes the feedback out of those programs is buzzword, buzzword, buzzword. We don't normally talk like that as people. So make sure that you go through it with the lens of how would I speak this? And sometimes even reading it out loud, reading your resume out loud to yourself is very helpful to
Mhm.
understand how it comes across in the story that you're telling.
Okay, a quick question with a
Yes.
hopefully quick answer, to
Yeah.
settle the very long, big debate about 2 pages or 1 page for a resume.
Oh, yeah, I don't understand why this is such an issue for people. I'm telling people all the time you can have 2 pages. And
Okay.
honestly, readability is a huge thing. As recruiters and hiring managers are spending on average less than 10 seconds looking at your resume, they need places for their eyes to rest. It's just, would you read the dictionary? Would you read the phone book? No, it's exhausting. It's a wall of text. You can't get through it. If your one page is a wall of text, it's not effective. Bring it onto 2 pages, maximize some of your margins, give the text room to breathe. You absolutely don't need a one-page resume. I would say the one place you might have one page is if you're very early career or if you're an undergraduate. At that point, you should probably have a one-page resume, but pretty quickly you'll be in 2 pages.
Yes, so take up space,
Yes.
2
Yeah.
pages,
Tell
and
your story.
100%, and I would say from reading resumes as well, that visual aspect is important. Make
Mhm.
sure there's some breathing space, some
Mhm.
breathing room in there. Don't try and pack it all in because think of that first experience you have when you look at a page, and if you're overwhelmed,
Yes.
you're not gonna process. So think about readability. I love that point. The other question I have that I get a lot too is you mentioned job descriptions, and
Mhm.
sometimes these job descriptions are wild, right? It's like
Yes.
the
Yes.
Oxford English Dictionary and like the World Atlas in one place, right? It's just like
Yes.
lists of skills and competencies and experiences and tasks. And you're like, what? As one question is, how much are we supposed to take that list as this like ideal wish list versus no, I need to tick all these boxes? And I ask this in particular
Yes.
for the fact that women tend to apply to roles only if they feel like they match all of the requirements. So walk us through
Yes.
that when we're reading these job descriptions, like how much do we need to match it?
Yep. I liken this to being a kid and writing your Christmas list, right? You write all of the things that you want, and it is not realistic that any one person would embody all of these different skills, experiences, and characteristics. I think that this is also symptom of people who are writing job descriptions who have maybe never recruited because I think sometimes you're asking for divergent skill sets and you're asking for one person to contain so many multitudes that really this idea that you're going for a unicorn, that's something that we talk about in recruiting, this person doesn't really exist. And so I would say pay attention to the language of preferred or required versus nice to have. And think about it this way, to your point, women do want to meet 100% or more of the criteria. Men, much less. They will apply after they've had maybe not even 50% of the matching criteria. And science has showed us even less than that sometimes. So if I'm going through the job description, I would say to myself, okay, let's say I have 5 out of 10. The other five, what do I need to do? What skills do I need to have? What courses might I need to take? What books can I read? What friends do I have that are in this functional area or in possession of these types of skills and experiences? And how difficult is it for me to bridge this gap in the first 6 to 12 months of this role? If those are easy yeses, you should not hold yourself back. We have to remember that we are in a constant state of growth. Companies are very unlikely to find these magic Christmas lists of everything that they're looking for. And I think really going into the process of an interview or an application with a strong belief in yourself and the neuroplasticity that we all have to learn new things and to develop new and to bring ourselves to the next level is really important, because if we don't believe and convey that about ourselves, how are companies going to believe that about us?
Yeah, and I wanna say when I joined my last big company where I
Mm-hmm.
was in a pretty big role, so I was running a global retail research at a
Mm-hmm.
company, and I will fully own that when I stepped into that role, I did not know what a cap rate was. Okay,
Yeah.
so even though I had some experience in the industry, I didn't tick all these tactical sort of
Mm-hmm.
skills boxes, but to your point around neuroplasticity learning, a lot of these things are not rocket science. If you're a doctor, yes, we want you to have a medical degree. It's
Yes.
important. But believe in yourself to a certain extent, especially if you're willing to go a little bit further and learn on the job and ask the right questions. Ask all the questions.
All the
Um,
questions. Yes.
all the questions. So I think that's really important. The next question I have really is about, okay, you see the job post, you create the resume,
Mm-hmm.
you tweak it, you run it through ChatGPT, you submit it, and then crickets, right? Are there
Yeah.
any best practices you suggest about, do you follow up directly with the recruiter? Do you send an email? What can candidates do to make sure that resume actually gets real human eyes on it?
For sure. So I would say there's a lot of different things that you can do. So the first thing that I would suggest is, if there is a company and a role that you're very interested in, when you're going through the application process, try to understand the connections in your network to either the individual who posted the job. If you can see that, you can always see that. If not, you can search who might be the hiring manager for that particular position. It's really simple and straightforward. And in fact, I'll just walk you through the steps really quickly on LinkedIn. If you're Googling the company name, so I'm going to go just Google a company name, or not Google, I'm going to search a company name in LinkedIn. If I then go to their company page, and then I go to, I'm sorry, my screen is not full. If I go to then the people tab, just right underneath the header, I can see a list of people that are associated with that company. And then it'll show me the people that you may know. And so it's going to be the people that are first connections, second connections, third connections. I would make sure that you're following as many as possible people from that organization. If you already have connections, I would let that person know. And this is something you can also do too. Some companies, especially in periods of higher economic prosperity, you will see companies start to pay their employees referral bonuses for bringing candidates to the table. And so you might even want to reach out to your friend first and say, hey, I saw this job I'm very interested in on this job board. Send them the link, don't make them work for it. Say, I'm not sure what's the best way to approach this. Should I apply online? Can I send you my resume? Attach the resume even to that email. Make it really easy for them to refer you. And then ask them what their preference is. So that way, that person, if they're working in a company that pays referral bonuses, boom, they get a referral bonus if you're hired, and that's a win. And if they're not, and they tell you to apply directly, then maybe they can go in on the back end and put a word in the ear of the hiring manager, or personally deliver a hard copy of your resume to the desk of the person that's hiring. I think that's really important. If you're really interested in the company, you can also go a step further. And this is back to being really strategic. Set up a Google alert for that company. Follow the news for that company. As they're closing deals, maybe as they're out there and moving and shaking and in the business, you can congratulate the different newsmakers from that company. You can follow them. You can connect with them. Hey, I just saw this recent deal closing in BizNow. Congratulations. Would love to stay connected for the future. Engage with their content, add value to them, ask questions, go to networking events when you see them featured, maybe on panels or as an attendee. Like those are the tactical ways to take an application to the next level, become a known entity to them, either virtually. And this is easier sometimes for people who are introverts or maybe ambiverts among us. They want to make that connection on LinkedIn first or on social media first. And then they decide that, okay, I'm going to go to this networking event. I think I can introduce myself to this person and they might remember who I am. Take it to the next level. Always follow up. If you're working with an agency recruiter like myself, check-ins are welcome. I think as much as possible, we try to give you all the information that we know. And sometimes, unfortunately, things happen. People take vacations, kids get sick. So be patient, but be consistent in your follow-up. And two, when you're working with an HR department on the company side, the same thing applies. So just be, I think, gracious in your follow-up, be consistent. If you aren't selected for the position, I think it's really important we talk about kids in sports and losing gracefully. I think going to that person after the fact and saying, thank you so much for the time that you spent with me. I learned so much throughout this process. I really admire the company for XYZ reasons. I know that I'm not the fit today, but I'd love to stay in touch for future roles, is really classy. It makes you really memorable. It makes the likelihood that you are going to be considered for future opportunities much higher. And two, thank you notes, even if it's just an email, and even if it's just a quick email to the people that you met with throughout the interview process. People these days, on average, are working for 12 different companies throughout their career. And so those folks are going to go cross-pollinate to other organizations, and they're going to remember that positive interaction with you because it's different. And most people don't go that extra mile. So I think it's incumbent on you to leverage all these different opportunities that you have and to conduct a different job search. And it's much more pleasant, in my opinion, to be able to send notes like that, to be able to interact with people's content on LinkedIn than it is to just aggressively scroll the job boards, apply to 100 kind of jobs and not get any kind of in-person validation or communication. I think this is really the way of the future. And there's actually a stat, I'm just scrolling through because I didn't want to misquote it. Research has shown that anywhere from 50 to 80% of all jobs are filled through networking, while some of up to 70% of jobs are not actually posted on public job sites, which is
Mm,
wild, right?
mhm.
If I'm in a business where maybe only 20% of roles I could even potentially be asked to fill, like that's a very small percentage. So I do think the things that you're doing, like going to networking events, like maybe being a leader in some of these industry organizations, serving on committees, even just showing up at these events, I think is really important. People will remember you if you take the time to get to know them, if you're adding value to them, if you're following up with them after you meet. So all of these things I think are the next level, really tactical approach to the job search.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because next week, doing a live with Erin Sheen,
Mhm.
who's an amazing career coach, and she's going to be talking specifically about networking. So if that's something you struggle with or want to learn how to do better, I relate. We're going to talk all
Yeah,
about that. So I'm excited for that because I do think it's really important to the point that you mentioned. So given that all that you just said, right?
yeah,
How can because it's important. How
yeah,
can we leverage recruiters, right? If you're a job
for sure.
seeker. So when I was first starting my career, I started off in London in the UK where
Mhm.
recruiters are a much bigger part of the job
Yeah.
search at all levels from
Mhm.
entry up to executive. So here in the US, how can job seekers at different levels leverage recruiters? Should they be reaching out to recruiters on LinkedIn? Should they be sending their resume? Like how can they leverage people like you?
For sure. So, one of the things that I would say is a common misconception about recruiters in the US versus other countries is that recruiters are going to do all of the work for you. We represent a certain number of companies, a certain number of roles at any given time. And beyond that, we might have a few clients. Like, I have a few clients that I have strong relationships with where if I meet someone who has their ideal qualities or has certain characteristics, I have an open door to make an introduction, even if there isn't a role. But for the most part, we have our purview that we work within. We have some connections to other friends, maybe who are doing similar work. For instance, I am a big fan of the women at Keller Augusta. And so, if I'm not working on something that would be a fit for someone, I might pass those introductions on to those friends and vice versa. So, I would say, We can't unfortunately do everything for you because there are so many more opportunities than we're actually working on, but we can help you if you're very specific in what it is you're looking for. So when you are reaching out to a recruiter, rather than saying, I'm just looking to get my foot in the door, that's not super helpful to us generally, unless you're a very early career person and you've got a real estate education that says, okay, maybe this person wants to be an analyst and they want to go through the traditional kind of analyst career path within a brokerage or within an investment firm or what have you. Be very specific with us. What location or locations are you open to? What are you ideally seeking from a compensation standpoint? What particular asset classes do you love, and the asset classes that maybe you're not interested in? Do you enjoy being in large firm or small firm or mid-size environments? Any sort of specificity can really help us. I do think, too, a really important thing in working with recruiters is giving us feedback. And so when we reach out to you about a role, if that role isn't a fit and something you want to move forward with, helping us to understand the why so we can continually refine our process and bring you better things in the future, I think is really important. I think being open to coaching as it relates to maybe interviewing. I like to give my candidates the opportunity to have an interview prep call with me if they like one, usually because some time might have elapsed between the first introduction of that candidate's background to the client versus the first interview with the client. And so then we can go ahead and rehash the story of the client and kind of the parallels maybe between the company's story and the candidate's story. So I would say take those opportunities. Hopefully your recruiters know their clients really well. They can give you insights on people's personalities, how they like to make hiring decisions, even down to I have certain clients that don't smile as much in an interview, and that really makes some people panic, but that's just really literally their style. It's a generational thing. It might be a cultural thing. All those sorts of little bits of information can help you be prepared when you step into that interview and it's, oh, such and such didn't smile at me, but I was ready for it and it didn't rattle me at all. So listen to that feedback. I would say one of the things also that I see sometimes, unfortunately, is that people will pay lots and lots of money to folks outside of our industry to redo their resume. And a lot of times that money, unfortunately, could be better spent. I do think that people who are recruiting within commercial real estate know what commercial real estate companies are looking for. They understand different keywords that are important, down to the way that I think about doing a resume is, how can I get past the least sophisticated resume reviewer, whether that's the hiring manager, whether that's the recruiter. So for instance, you might be applying for a role with a multifamily investment firm, but they don't talk about multifamily. They talk about apartments, or they talk about housing, or whatever the vernacular is, match their vernacular. And so even sometimes I think varying between multifamily, multi-housing, and apartments, you never know what keyword somebody's going to search. And sometimes the recruiters or the hiring managers, the people in HR who might be reviewing these things, don't have that commercial real estate background, right? They might not understand that it's important, and those are all the same thing. And so think about those things moving forward. And really, I think there's a number of different things that you can do to beat the system, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. And we just got a really great question. A reminder to anyone
Oh,
who's live, feel
good.
free to pose those questions. I'm looking at them right now. So this is a great question. It's a little bit around networking, which we're definitely going to
Mhm,
dive into even more next week. But I like this question a lot. It's when you're reaching out to your network, maybe former colleagues,
mhm,
clients, everybody wants to help, right? Like people are willing to have those conversations, but they don't really know what to do. So when you go ask them for help, here's my resume, it's what I'm looking for. And
mhm.
it's okay if I know anyone, if I see anything, I'll say, what can job seekers do in those conversations or in that networking to make a really clear, to make it easy for the person they're asking for help to help them?
Yes. So this is a great question. And I actually think I have a resume, or not a resume, an email template that I created for this specific purpose. Melina and I are talking about doing another session, which is a layoff emergency guide or survival kit or something like that. Oftentimes, unfortunately, if you're laid off, you don't have the opportunity to then go talk to your coworkers about it in person or on the phone virtually. You might feel like, oh, I was the only person affected. I don't know how to have this conversation, or I don't even know what I want to do next. Sometimes it's you've got to do a little soul searching before you can come back and say to that person, Here's what I'm really looking for. So I think equipping the people in your network with that specificity that you're going to give to a recruiter. Okay. Hey, such and such, as you may have heard, my time with XYZ has come to an end. I really value our connection and our relationship, and I want to stay in touch moving forward. In the meantime, if you have any connections in XYZ market, in XYZ types of companies, I am specifically looking for a role that will leverage my X years of experience, passion for whatever. Like I have a more specific template that you can exactly use, but you basically want to give people your elevator pitch so they can, as they are going to an event and meeting with colleagues, as they are having a meeting maybe with a friend across town who works for another company, that they have that ready to go. It's really quick, it's really clear, and it's really succinct. Have your resume there, have your LinkedIn profile there. Share with them also what's not a fit. I think sometimes we don't want to rule ourselves out of opportunities. We don't want to say, oh, I'm not interested in doing this. But I think it's much easier to say that up front so no one extends their goodwill on your behalf. And then you actually have to say to them, oh, no, actually, that's beneath my skill set, or that's not what I want to focus on moving forward. So thinking about those sorts of things. And again, just really preparing and equipping them to work on your behalf, and also doing some legwork into, maybe you're looking at a company, you might see that you have a second connection to a person at that company, and that friend is that second connection. Mention that. Hey, I just applied for this role. I see you're connected to the chief acquisitions officer. I'm not sure if that's a strong connection or a friendship or just someone from online, but I'm wondering if you might be willing to reach out to that person just to let them know that I applied, and that you might recommend me for the role. I think being very specific with those asks, doing the homework to understand the connections, and also trying to add value to them as well, right? It's a give and take. Keeping them updated if you are interviewing. I think that's an important piece that a lot of people miss. Sometimes I'm referring folks out that are more entry level, maybe people that it would be difficult for me to place, but I'm making a connection. I just had a situation where someone that I had sent an email to, a friend and colleague of mine, got hired by that company, and I saw it through a LinkedIn. I saw it through a LinkedIn post. So I messaged that person and said, "Hey, congratulations." It's nice to keep in touch and to let the people know who have helped you what has happened.
Yeah.
People are invested. They do care about your career search. They want to feel like that you're taking full advantage. You're appreciative of the work that they've done, because they're extending social capital on your behalf. And so it's really important to keep them in the know and to close the loop, if you will.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I can say from someone, like a lot of folks have reached out to me over the years when
Mhm.
they're looking for a role, and I'm always happy to help. And I also usually end the email with "keep me posted" or end the call with "keep me
Yes.
posted." And I really mean it. To your
Yes.
point, let me know how it's going. If it's 6 months out and you got close to something, but it didn't work because of XYZ and you pivoted here, let me know. If you got a
Yes.
role, let me know. I want to celebrate
Yes.
that. Definitely do that. And I think to your point about the job tracker and maybe networking
Mhm.
tracker is going to be helpful. So we'll share that with everyone after. And the other thing is, yeah, I love leverage LinkedIn, leverage your networks for if you're applying to a role you interviewed and you saw that one of your former colleagues now works there or knows someone who's
Mhm.
there based on their LinkedIn connections. I've had this happen to me. Reached out, hey, I'm interviewing with this firm. I'm really into this role. I really want it.
Mhm.
Would you be open to putting in a good word or reaching out to so and so if you're comfortable? And most of the time, if we've worked together and I can truly vouch for that person, absolutely I will do that.
Yes.
So don't hesitate to ask, right? I
Yes.
think that can be really helpful. A little question that's popped up in my head around
Mhm.
LinkedIn. So you're looking for work, the little green banner on your profile photo that says open to work, right? How do
Yes.
we feel about that? What are your thoughts on whether that's good, neutral, helpful?
Yes. So there was some controversy on LinkedIn about this, maybe about 4 to 6 weeks ago, where there was a recruiter who shall not be named, not in our industry, who said, "Don't do this. This is desperate. This actually devalues you as a candidate." I disagree completely. I think you should use every opportunity to network, let people know. I think the way that sometimes people are posting, hey, my time has come to a close with this company. It's really interesting to me because it feels like some of those posts are award acceptance speeches in a way that, hey, I just left my time with this company and I'm so grateful for all of these things. I think you can strike a balance of that, of, hey, this is what I learned. This is what I'm bringing into the future with me. This is what I'm looking for. And then I would also remember that you're in this situation because of that company. And I think it's important to let people know, to put a positive spin on it, and to use that open to work, use the different features that are built into LinkedIn that allow you on the back end to let recruiters know that you're open minded to new opportunities. You can do that without having the open to work banner if that makes you uncomfortable. I know that naturally it makes some people a little bit less comfortable. The other thing too is if you are in the situation, and I know a lot of people are there, where they've maybe survived round number one and maybe number two, and they're just very concerned. I think it's a smart proactive thing to do, to let recruiters know that you're open minded to hearing about new things. And again, you can do that privately on LinkedIn without allowing your current company to know about it in such a public way as the open to work banner. And back to your point about the survivors of layoffs and the people who are still in companies who maybe want to move and haven't moved just because the current economic climate, I think there are things that you can do proactively if you feel like there's the threat of a layoff or reduction in your time or hours or whatever. So I think that's something, definitely use open to work, use these different things. And I see we've got a great question. So I'm going to stop rambling.
So I'm so glad that this question was just posed because I was actually going to ask this question.
Oh,
So thank
great.
you. So this question is, I think, relevant for so many people, which is,
Yeah.
okay, you have experience in one thing, in this case, let's say retail asset management, but you
Mhm.
want to pivot and transition to a different asset type. And this can apply to lots of different industries, right? Let's
Sure.
say you've been in retail, you have 10 years of experience in retail, maybe you want to dabble in office, right? Or you're
Mhm.
looking for roles. How can you, when you're looking for a little bit of a pivot in
Mhm.
something, position yourself, because it feels from these job descriptions that a lot of times these companies are looking for people with specific job experience related directly to that job. So how best do you position yourself as a great candidate when you're trying to pivot?
For sure. So I would say there are certain companies that have flexibility, and then there's others that I work with that are very rigid, that they only want this type of experience. And so I think it's good to get a sense right away for what you're dealing with and then just move on if there's not that flexibility. I think as much as you possibly can to draw parallels and talk about the actual work that is similar and consistent between the asset class that you have experience in and the one that you're interested in. For instance, retail CAM charges, common area maintenance charges, might be the same between retail and office, or similar, right? So you have to do CAM reconciliations or CAM accounting. I would think about breaking it down to the most common similar building blocks and talking about that on your resume, talking about that in conversation. Another example of something similar between retail and office, as long as you're dealing with multi-tenant, you are, single tenant is another thing, but multi-tenant, you've got that experience. If you're in multi-tenant retail, dealing with a number of different office tenants is very similar, right? They've got, both of them are also spaces in which people work. There's lots of similarities there. So I think focusing on what's the same as opposed to what's different in the way that you talk about things on LinkedIn, talk about things on your resume. I think also too, some of the ways to get over this is to start networking within different associations. For instance, if you're a retail person, you've probably spent a lot of time at ICSC events. You've probably not so much been to NAIOP events. So even just changing the networks that you're spending time in, I think also, as much as you possibly can, if there's any kind of courses that you can take, if there friends that you have that are working with mixed portfolios, and even just trying to get some hands-on experience there, just saying, hey, would you do me a favor, would you allow me to underwrite maybe the next few deals that you're looking at from an acquisition standpoint. I really want to understand and be able to get my hands on some of these things, so I know the differences and I can talk about the differences, but I can also show that I have a demonstrable skill set that is very similar.
I completely agree, and coming from the
Mhm,
retail world myself, within
mhm.
commercial real estate, I think if you've had experience in retail, you can do anything, but I'm a little biased. In particular, I've had a lot of conversations about this, specifically retail to office
Yes.
transitions, and
Yes.
actually, one of the strongest cases I think you can make is that retail over the past 10 to 15 years
Mhm.
went through a massive
Yes.
upheaval.
Yes.
And anybody who was working in retail real estate had to adapt, be agile, be creative, think
Yep.
outside the box, literally and figuratively,
Yep.
and come up with new ways of measuring success and
Mhm.
revenue streams and rent. So, that experience that you've had
Mhm.
in an industry that went through massive change is extraordinarily helpful for an industry office right now that's going
Yes.
through massive change, where the people who have been doing office real estate the same way for 20, 30 years or
Yeah.
10 or 5 don't really know what to do. In the same way in retail, we didn't know what to do when that first changed. So
Yeah.
position yourself as an expert in pivoting, agility, adaptability, change, creative thinking, because that's what a lot of these industries need. I see that as a great asset. If you want to
Mhm.
have more conversations about resale specifically, I'll do that all day long. But
Yes.
yeah, I think that's really helpful for anybody that's thinking about how can I pivot and make myself an attractive candidate. One, to Allison's point, think about the similarities. What are the things that I've done and experienced here that could be relevant and helpful to this industry here? And number 2, do that research that Allison talked about, right? And make sure you're aware of the trends in that industry, of some of the challenges in that industry, of some of the metrics and things
Mhm.
like that. And that can you can do through desktop research, you can do through conversations, and position yourself as a better than average candidate because you come with a different set of skills.
I have
So,
one more point that just
yeah,
occurred to me too.
yeah.
So, as you are going into maybe the interview process or having a conversation with an HR person or even a hiring manager, I do think one of the ways to overcome it also is to get really smart on the assets in the portfolio of the company that you're speaking with. So, to show them that you have gone the extra mile, that you have drilled down. A lot of the firms that are my clients that have portfolios of assets and investments and things like that will have a map feature or have some other way of listing the properties that they own. Go through those properties, understand what their strategies might have been on those properties, what they're in the midst of. Maybe they're doing massive capex work, whatever the case might be. I think you overcome it also by showing a real interest in real legwork in understanding their unique portfolio and also the commonalities between the experiences that you've had previously. Maybe you've done a full gut remodel and they're in that process, or they need to with 3 recent acquisitions. I think that's another place to start that shows that you're going the extra mile and you're thinking not just about, oh, I want to be in this sector, but I want to be with this company working on this portfolio.
I love that. That's really helpful. And we're over time, but I'm going to ask one last question and
Sure.
then we'll close, which is to cover letter or not to cover letter. And I think in this instance, right, okay,
Yes.
maybe your resume doesn't communicate everything that you want to communicate, especially in the case of a pivot. How do you feel about cover letters or intro paragraphs, or like just settle the debate for us on that?
So it's interesting because during COVID and pre COVID, I felt very differently than I feel today. I would say cover letters generally are not being read. They're probably an expenditure of time that maybe could be spent in other places. What I would say is a very well written, succinct, and clear email follow up or a email introduction with your resume or an in-mail to someone that is more effective, I think, than the cover letter. As to your point, if you are a career changer, if you're pivoting, if something might not make sense or somebody might knee jerk immediately bounce you from that particular search because of a gap or because of a lack of a certain type of experience, use a cover letter or the email or the in-mail to explain that and to try to overcome that objection before it happens. But generally, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I think cover letters have breathed their last breath.
Yes, and especially please, if you're gonna do a cover letter, don't make it sound like it came from ChatGPT because
Oh,
it's the worst. Don't do
yeah,
that.
it's
If
worse.
you
It's
need
worse
pe
than,
and tell you
yeah,
this sounds like ChatGPT, just do it,
yes,
but
yes.
we should probably do a whole session on ChatGPT and the process
True.
But
you.
Allison, thank you so much. You mentioned a couple tools that we'll get
Yes.
together and we will make sure that everyone who attended and who's interested gets those. And I also want to do a plug that this session came out really organically of I
Mhm.
saw a need and questions I was being asked and Allison too and we wanted to do this and I've got a couple other sessions in the works with other folks with expertise in different areas and next week I'm going to do a conversation with Erin Sheen, who's, as I mentioned, a great career coach, who's going to talk specifically about networking and what are the ways and the tools that you can use to network really well when you're in the job search process, especially when you hate networking. Thank you, Allison, so much. Is there anything else that you want to share with the group about if they have questions for you or would like to follow you? How can they do that?
Sure. I would say definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to send me an email. My email is really simple. It's Allison, Allison, at crerecruiting.com. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn, send me an email, follow along. My content usually has a lot to do with job seeking and the job search process. And I'm happy to help if you have questions.
Yes, I second that. Allison posts really helpful resources that I've used as well in my work.
Great.
So great to follow. I also post a lot of research on the workplace
Mhm.
and humans that so feel free to engage with me there as well. You know where to find me. And I hope this was helpful. And if there are other topics or questions that you think would be helpful for you and others, let me know and I'll find someone to teach us about it. So,
Yay.
on that, everyone have a great, somewhat lazy Friday and enjoy your weekends.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.